Hello, everyone. Welcome to CareNext Collective, presented to you by Manulife Canada. For those joining us for the first time, CareNext Collective is a forum for healthcare innovation across our region and beyond. Each month, we bring together clinicians, health system leaders, researchers, patient partners, and innovators to work through the realities we are facing in healthcare today. We look at emerging signals and trends. We examine how change is actually showing up in practice, and we take on the more complex questions, whether they're clinical, operational, and policy implications that don't yet have clear answers. The purpose really is to exchange our perspectives, mobilize our community, share knowledge in a way that is useful, surface insights that can inform decisions, and to support action with our organizations and across the system. Over time, this is how we build capability individually as well as collectively. So today's discussion that I'm so excited about sits very much in this space. Many of you are starting to encounter situations where patients arrive having already consulted digital tools, including AI-based tools, as part of trying to understand their health. This shows up in different ways. Sometimes it supports understanding. Patients come in more informed with clearer questions and a stronger sense of what they're experiencing. Sometimes it introduces additional complexity with information that requires interpretation and alignment within the clinical context. From clinician perspective, this adds a new layer to the interaction. It brings forward more information, more questions, but also some challenges. From the patient perspective, this reflects a set of real drivers. Patients are navigating time between encounters, they're seeking access to information, they're managing uncertainty, and they're looking for ways to better understand what is happening to them. So AI is becoming one of the tools they are using to do that. And what we're really seeing is a new dynamic emerging. Patients are often present with this type of tool. It presents so often that it warrants direct and thoughtful engagement. And so the question that's guiding our discussion today is, what does this mean for care delivery, and how should we respond in practice? So to engage in this discussion, I'm joined by an amazing panel today of individuals who bring complementary perspectives to this discussion. First, we're joined by Alvina Nadeem, who's patient partner and advocate whose experience bring this into sharp focus. Our friend and great supporter, Zaina Hayat, futurist and just woman extraordinaire, who works closely with health systems to interpret signals and translate them into strategic action. Ed Marks, co-author of The AI-Empowered Patient, the book for which we will provide the link in the chat, who has been examining how patient roles are evolving in this context. And last but not least, Dr. Payal Agarwal, family physician and REN's Chief Medical Information Innovation Officer, and also provincial lead for digital health. So welcome all. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Really excited to have this conversation with you. Before we begin, just a couple of words of logistics. So we have a chat function and we have a Q&A function. Chat function we want to keep for your comments, interactions. We will be pushing some polls in there, sharing information such as link to Ed's book. And then we ask you that you use the Q&A functions for your questions only. We want to make sure that we see them and prioritize them, and you are invited to interact with us throughout. We have community manager Carissa from CareNext team will be managing the interactions in the chat and Q&A as usual, and pushing it to us so that we can involve you in this discussion. As we begin the discussion, Carissa will be asking you a first poll question. In the past 3 months, how often has AI played a role in your clinical interactions, whether you are a clinician or a patient? So while that is happening in our chat function, I would like to invite our guest, Alvina, to walk us through her lived experience how did AI actually show up in your journey, Alina?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and it's so nice to be accompanied by such amazing people. Like lots of checklists on my bucket list going off. So yeah, so my background is I'm an engineer by training, a mechanical engineer, and I also do a lot of work in change management and innovation and things like that. So the reason why I preface this with that is because I was working in a digital, very like um just very involved hands-on type of digital space when I had my diagnosis. So it was something that, I as an engineer was interested in. So when AI came out, it was for me, it was part of my job to understand it. So I'm bringing you back to like 2022 November. It's coming out, and the thing that everyone's doing is, playing with AI to make emails sound better or things like that, right? So it was a very kind of hands-on experience for me in from a professional side. And then in I would say like January or February around there, I started to feel just a little off. And I'm a mom of two boys, and at the time they were 3 and 6. So for me, just like any other mom, I was just like, oh, this is what exhaustion looks like when you're a career woman and you're ambitious and things like that. So I just kind of brushed it off to that. But then it just kind of started to pile on a little. I was feeling extremely fatigued, was losing my appetite. But really, what kind of triggered some concern was just my menstrual cycle was off suddenly, and I was like, oh, that's really weird for me. Cramps and things like that. I never had cramps growing up either, so it was a bit of a red flag. And so as I was playing with AI, like I said, for my work, I just was curious, just out of pure curiosity, thinking, instead of Googling symptoms, as we all do, even though we shouldn't, but we do it. That's the reality. What if I asked, AI to see what this was, just kind of play with it. And it was really interesting because I had never used it for that purpose before, right? So I never had seen it exercise any form of like that human type of conversation. And I was very surprised with like the generated empathy that it created, almost like, oh, you're going through this thing, and I'm so sorry about that, and things like that. So then you're kind of like taken aback because, it's from going from make my email sound better to I'm sorry you feel this way. It's a very different dialogue. So it's really kind of it hits you, right? And so anyway, so I kind of was using it as a almost like a journal, if you will, because as I was getting more and more symptoms, well, which now I know were symptoms, but at the time I didn't think much of it. I was just like, oh, let me see what this can do. And so as I added more, it was almost serving to help me kind of create the constellation of all the different symptoms that I needed to present together to my doctor. Because it turns out what I had was ovarian cancer. And the thing about ovarian cancer is that it's a very kind of elusive cancer. It's a very silent disease, and it's silent because the symptoms can look like bloating and things like that you can have for other reasons, right? So if you don't know what constellation you're looking for, if you don't know how to connect those dots and present them and say, hey, I've got a big dipper here, you're going to be presenting one of the symptoms or two, and it's not going to get detected, especially as a 36-year-old at the time. It's not a disease you see in young people. So for me, it was a really like an aha moment. When I look back, I'm like, wow, like if I didn't have AI, I probably would not have said those things together to my doctor that would have prompted her then say, oh, let's go get imaging. It's the fact that I was able to bring that whole thing together. So it didn't diagnose me, but it helped me get the care I actually needed in time and early enough. So I had a stage 1 diagnosis. It turned out to be like a 16 centimeter mass, which is huge. So I was very
Mhm.
close to not being stage 1. So it was just, I'll stop there because there's so much more
Mhm.
we'll explore together, but I'll stop there for now.
Mhm. Thank you so much for sharing this personal account. We really appreciate this. Um, Ed, you literally wrote the book on this type of engagement. Can you kind of hearing what Alina said and based on what you have observed and collected, tell us what are patients now able to do, and is system appreciating that or underestimating that from your perspective?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. This is going to be a really great panel with really diverse viewpoints, and I might kind of be on one extreme, but I think it has given the power back to patients to control their own healthcare. I think in the past we've relied too heavily on the system, on our healthcare systems, and now it's enabling us to take more, be more engaged, take more ownership. And I think that's the thing we've struggled with for many, many years across the world is the accountability. We kind of took away from the patient, and the patient felt like, oh, I'm not accountable for my health. But I think AI will actually help them become not only more engaged, or it is doing that, but also more accountable for their own healthcare. And so it's giving them the tools, right? Like in Alvina's case, I have a similar story. I think everyone has a similar story or has a friend with a similar story where they are now truly empowered. It's different than the age of Google, like you mentioned, Dr. Google and things like that, because it didn't have the same capability, it didn't have the same speed, it didn't have the same sort of holistic capabilities that it has today. So I think to answer the question succinctly, the patient is empowered, the patient is more accountable, puts a lot of pressure on our clinicians and our systems now.
Mm-hmm. What capabilities do you see emerging that weren't possible, let's say 2-3 years ago?
Well, self-diagnosis, for one. So, we did not have, the average consumer does not have the education, the incredible education that clinicians go through. So much respect for all the years of training that they go through, and then actualization of that training and practice throughout the years. Now that's been sort of democratized in a sense, right? Because now we have similar access. So clinicians, we're using, in many cases, an AI-empowered patient is using the same tools as a clinician has access to. So it's sort of brought that capability where I'm not suggesting that patients go ahead and become their own clinician. I'm not saying that, but I am saying have the same tools available. And so we still need the clinician to help guide us, to help understand, because we don't have that. The AI is not going to replicate that, but it can help us in diagnosis. It can help us in terms of, hey, what can we do to improve ourselves, to better ourselves, so we don't have to go in and see a clinician. So it's given us a lot of those tools that weren't available in the past. The diagnosis and the ability to come out with their own treatment plan that will keep us healthy. Those are just a couple. There's so much, but
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Are we overestimating AI's capability, or are we underestimating patient behavior at this moment?
Is that for Ed?
Ed or anyone can pitch in. Zaina, do you want to?
I wonder if it's both. But I'll tell you, like Ed, I hang out in this space and collect examples like Alvina's, and Ed, you've got so many in your book. I get like a few a day where I'm like, I am underestimating what the power of having, not only, as Ed said, all the information and knowledge in everyone's hands, but all the solutions and tools. That's actually kind of never happened in the history of being a patient. So then I get surprised every day. I have so many examples. But then I think, and Alvina, you hinted at it, and I don't know if you were critiquing the AI, it is really nice to you and very confirming, unless you change your settings and, you tell it to be an a-hole to you or something. But, and I think there is like, there's a lot of research on this, but I think we're all starting to see this interesting thing, especially when, you don't have access to care, you're not heard, you're not listened to, you're afraid. I think I don't think we're underestimating, or maybe over promising. I think there is some risks there, and everyone will want to say, oh, you're going to get bad care. And I fundamentally disagree with the Canadian Medical Association paper that came out that said 1 in 5 Canadians are harming themselves. Like, please. Okay. But so I'm not really worried about the individual potential harm of like you over believing your very friendly AI. I'm thinking more, and Payal can probably speak to this, the more we get reliant on these things, it's kind of like, if my GPS breaks, I don't even know how to get home anymore. Like, so just us losing critical thinking is maybe the drift that I'm concerned about.
Payal, do you want to build on that? Do you see risk as technical or behavioral or both?
I mean, first of all, again, thanks so much for having me. This is such an exciting panel. I mean, I think it's both. I think the risk, though, is always with almost any digital or piece new innovation, it's more behavioral than it is technical. I think there are technical pieces, but I think there's a lot of, important kind of helping everyone in the system understand how to best leverage this new technology. I just want to say, like Alvina, you talked about, I was able to come to my physician with the exact set of symptoms so that they could help you, get the tests you need and get the diagnosis. That's amazing. That's exactly what we want as well. This is such, has such potential to benefit like everyone in the system. Ed talked about that. Yeah, this is going to have empowered patients that are able to, be in charge of their care and have some accountability for their health outcomes. That's amazing. That's exactly what we need as a health system. Like, let's be honest, our health system is not great right now at sort of empowering patients and helping them really, take charge of their healthcare. So I think, if we start by recognizing there's some beautiful shared goals here that we can all work towards, I think it's, a great place to start. And then it's just a matter of how do we bring everyone along and, help everyone work through the change. There's no question it's change. When you come in with your, AI summary, that's different for me as a clinician. And, who's helping me just sort of think through how I work through that, how I change, how I think about, we have our models, we have ways we were taught, and that has to change. And I think that's a big responsibility. Some of what I think about in my leadership roles is how do I make sure that, clinicians, all clinicians are really ready to engage with that so that we can continue to be there as a partner in care. And I think there's just such a great opportunity here, but we just have to be thoughtful around it for sure.
If I could just respond to that, Danina.
Absolutely.
Because
please.
one thing I have to make clear, though, is that you have to remember, like when I was using this AI tool, it was in the early days. So I did not dare mention that I used AI, right? So I also, my approach when I brought it to my doctor was not like, here's a 40-pager, you don't know anything. That was not the approach. The approach was like almost like I was almost embarrassed of like even wanting to share that because I was like, she's gonna think I'm crazy, my doctor's gonna think I'm nuts. So I brought it in a very different way of saying like, oh, I'm having these symptoms. It was not like here's something you got to figure out. So that's an interesting point that you made, because now I don't think that's what's happening anymore. Now we're kind of just bringing it, like bringing in the 40-pager. The other thing was, to the question you asked about like overestimating, underestimating. I think one thing that we have to really consider is, and it's something I often think back about, like, if there's a fire in your house, okay, you're going to jump out your window and you'll worry about your broken leg later. So when we're in those situations, when we're in survival mode, we will do things to survive first, and then we will do damage control later. So to me, that's a really important thing to think about, because when I'm today using it, when my life is not threatened, I'm way more careful about what I'm sharing. But when I was going through this, survival mode setting, going through cancer, it was a very different mode. It was like, I don't care. Like, I don't care if my data is private if I'm dead. You know what I mean? Like that's like, it's as blunt as that, because that's what's happening in your head. So there's definitely this conversation around, we are willing to share more and do more, take more risk if it means we might survive. That does mean that we are doing riskier things. And so we do need guardrails. So we do need to kind of think of that difference in our own behavior, that, like today I wouldn't do certain things that I may have done,
Can I respond
to me? Absolutely. Please do. Yeah.
No, I would just say, so I think it's the I will say, I think it's the responsibility of the system. You shouldn't have to make those trade-offs, right? It shouldn't be, well, I'm so worried that I'm going to make these trade-offs and do something that's potentially risky with my health data. I will say, as a health system, I think that's where we're at. We've got to, give you an option that's safe, that keeps your data provided, and gives you, the ability to leverage AI in all patients, right? With all of their different sort of, how they approach the problem. So anyway, I think that's a really important point and a call to the system. You shouldn't have to make those trade-offs.
It seems like there's work to be done on both sides. There's work to be done on the patient side, and then there's the work to be done on the system side. And I think you both spoke very eloquently from both ends. We need to prepare the system. We need to prepare our physicians and our healthcare providers, but also we have to make sure that our patients come into this equipped. I think I've seen a comment someone said in the chat that they consulted with their GP, who consulted open evidence. They consulted Gemini, and there was a difference in opinion there from the AI perspective. Zaina, what does this signal to us about where the healthcare is going?
I mean, I think Ed spoke to it. Like those of us who have been in this future of health game for a while, we always had a major shift being the agency or power. So at the end of it, let's remind the difference between health and healthcare. Okay, health is a result. That's what we want. That's why we do this. That's why we all work in this sector. Healthcare is a service that I outsource my agency to when I can't figure it out on my own. That's all healthcare is. It's a $360 billion enterprise here in Canada. Ed, I don't even know how many trillions in your country. So you guys probably 90% of the time, everyone on this call, self-diagnoses, treats, and manages without ever outsourcing our agency. So I think this power shift now, as Ed said, is that was already happening as we all came to expect a level of autonomy, engagement, empowerment. I loved your word, accountability, Ed. Just like you don't need to hire a contractor anymore to, I don't know, build that extension of your house, or you don't need to outsource your agency maybe to pluck your own you can pluck your own eyebrows. You don't need to go to a salon. Like, it doesn't matter, right? We've learned to do that in pretty much every other aspect of our service. And healthcare was largely the holy grail for these medical activities. So that shift was always happening. It is now on warp speed. In a way, I'd say all the other shifts in the future of health that are all getting hyper accelerated by this AI, this is the one that I have found has been locked, and we never had a key. So it's just going to be more and more. Another one I just think is a big one is, so we've been talking about kind of empowerment, self-care, self-management, and being ready for your clinical encounter. The other big area, though, is we are not going to allow what happened with social media. So where a few narrow vendors, kind of tech people owned, have changed the world with these platforms. I think there's a consciousness that the citizenship, we finance our healthcare system, at least in Canada, that we want to create the health commons to decide what the algorithms value or don't value, who profits from those algorithms, how the data is sourced, used. There's this other new layer of kind of citizen sovereignty that I think is coming next, that because we keep talking about, oh, you're going to go to your doctor with a 40-page report, like that's obsessing all the oxygen right now. This is coming. And I think it's a unique time for Canada, given other issues of sovereignty that are really affecting a lot of decisions. And what do you think is coming? Yeah. You wrote the book.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're all as knowledgeable, if not more so, than I am. But I wrote the book along with my wife, who's a clinician, so we're getting some of her angle in there as well. But yeah, I think right now there's a fair amount of resistance, and it's similar to what we experienced when the electronic health record emerged. We had all sorts of pushback saying we're going to kill patients. We are going to, we're going to hurt the ecosystem, and people were going to quit medicine. And also, we're automating, we're taking out the personalization out of it. And that didn't happen. In fact, I think we saved lives. As kludgy as our electronic health records might be, I think we ended up saving lives, improving quality. And so I see the resistance very similar today, where there's a lot of pushback. And things are getting better. The AI is getting better. Our clinicians are getting better. Everything's improving. So I think we're going to see the resistance sort of remove itself over a short period of time, and more embracing. There's no way. Again, I love clinicians, and so I never want anyone to interpret anything that I say as being anything against clinicians. We need them. I love them. They've saved my life. They've saved many of our lives. So I think there just needs to be more openness now to partner and adopt and share in the responsibility of our health, while the person, again, is accountable, the patient is accountable, but we can all leverage these capabilities to ensure better health for everyone, better outcomes. So that's what I see happening. A little bit of resistance now. I see that going away. I see it's similar to what happened with rideshare. Rideshare at first, people are saying, well, what's going to happen? You're going to get killed. Something bad can happen. And eventually we let it go. And now rideshare with autonomous vehicles in the United States, there was a comparison between Uber and Waymo, which is an autonomous service that's becoming very popular in the United States. And sure enough, the accident incident rate of Waymo was a little bit higher than Uber, but today it's lower. And I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see AI, the algorithms improve, the experiences improve, and ultimately, I think everyone's going to look back, a couple of years and say, how did we survive without this?
Is there a risk that the system does nothing? And if so, what do you think will be the sort of the fallout?
I mean,
Ayal, Zaina?
yeah, I'll start. I can start
Yeah.
as like someone
Yeah.
who works at a provincial level and stuff as well. I think there is a risk that the system doesn't do something fast enough, right? I think people are talking about it. I don't think anyone's like, completely ignoring the issue, but we're slow in the system, right? We're not used to working fast. We're especially not used to working fast on big, complex problems that are multidisciplinary, and that's not our skill set. So, I think that is the call to action. I think we need a lot more people who are really good at working through messy, multidisciplinary problems quickly, pragmatically to get some movement on here. So I will say I think there is very much a risk that we don't move fast enough. What does that mean? It means patients are going to have to keep making trade-offs. Like, do I ask AI and risk, where my data goes? Not a great trade-off for patients. I think there are going to be people who aren't able, maybe can't engage with AI without some support, some education, right? So we're going to risk widening some equity gaps, which is never good. So I think there are some very real risks if we don't kind of engage with this, as a system and figure out how to enable it quickly. And I think the real risk is we'll move too slow.
Zaina and Ed, where will this potentially create the pressure in the system?
I can start, and this is just a bit of what we're picking up. Payal hinted at it a little bit in terms of, you can't really access care, a treatment plan, investigations you need, like Alvina in your example, until you have a diagnosis. And the domain of diagnostics, which is called the science of medicine, is the physician, right? They're the diagnostician. And so that bottleneck, the first appointment, to get to the diagnostic, I think is getting a lot more released because there are ways to do that either faster or maybe without ever involving a physician. Not that I'm condoning it, but that's what patients are doing. I see it every day. All that then does, of course, is moves the bottleneck downstream to the next step if you would have got the diagnostic, which is whatever, secondary investigations or treatment. So I think that's our big challenge next is people are still going to ultimately need some kind of care. And the bottleneck, the gatekeeper in Canada is the physician. They prescribe drugs, they order labs, they order imaging, and a primary care physician like Payal is ultimately the quarterback linking to all these specialists, unless you get cancer, Alvina, as you know, where you might have a tumor board and you've got a med-onc or an oncologist. But so I think that's what is being talked about, in addition to Payal's very real kind of discussion around there's a way medicine has been practiced for a very long time. We are right now training people in medical school and nursing school to practice that way. And that is not what's showing up, at the consults. So I just think there's like these new bottlenecks are going to be created and patients are going to move on.
Yeah.
Ed, do you have a perspective on this?
Yeah, it's similar in the United States. I know a lot of times people say, well, you might wait a long time for care in Canada, but in the United States, it's easily access. It's not true. We have the same access issues as you do. And I do see AI as a way to loosen up access a bit. And I think we can leverage AI for the clinician's benefit, for the primary care, for the GP, to allow them to focus on core, not chores. I think today there's a lot of administrative things that are highly educated, amazing clinicians are doing that they shouldn't need to do, and they could focus on the patient. And so I see that transition sort of happening now. To Dr. Agarwal's point, it's a little bit slow in our institutions, and I'm so glad of her point of view. Like she knows it. She's like trying to make it go faster. It's very hard sometimes in our bureaucracies that we're all a part of to make things happen. I think what is going to happen, and I think Zaina just alluded to it, is that if you're the patient and you are using AI in all other aspects of your life, and you're seeing all the benefits of AI, and your healthcare institution is slow to adopt, you are going to move on. I think that's where your words. They're going to move on. And I think that's the pressure point. So the pressure point is if we don't make decisions faster in our organizations, the patients will move on because they're going to hear stories like Alvina's, like their friends' stories, and they're like, there's another way. And it also removes a cost issue. Now, cost may not be, although I know it still is, as you know, it's a very big issue in the United States. Both on a personal level and as a systematic, you know, it's 18% of our GDP. And so all of a sudden, wow, the cost is gone away because a lot of the startups that are very active today that are agent only based healthcare, it's free. So, wow, you mean I don't have to wait for an hour for an appointment? You know, first I'm going to wait 2 months for my appointment. I'm going to drive an hour to get there, sit in the waiting room for an hour. You know, it's a 3 or 4 hour ordeal. And then they're going to charge me a couple $100 copay. Wait, I could have done this all on my app for 85% of the care, which is my estimation. Wow, I think there's a different way. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on our organizations to be more customer centric, customer responsive in order to succeed in the future.
Balaji just said in the comment, I worry sometimes about zero-sum nature of the discussions. Thou shalt rely on traditional healthcare versus via door one or AI only via door two, and a choice must be made. I want to see more discourse around how AI can help patients have better discussions, integration with the healthcare providers, and help providers deliver better care. The latter is a conversation, but former needs more. Alvina, do you have a response to this?
Oh my God, so many. No, yeah, so like I was telling you guys, like, you know, I ended up, so that was the beginning, what I shared earlier. That was like the beginning of that journey of using AI. Once I, you know, was in the care path, you know, that starts as soon as you enter the clinician's door. Well, after that, I was just intrigued by what else could I do? How else could I explore AI? So now I really went into this experiment mode, and I was like, okay, so now a concrete example of that is I had bought this recipe book that was designed specifically for people in chemo, you know, treatment. And so it was designed by the American, I think it's by the American Cancer Society with nutritionists, et cetera. And so the way it's built, it's really built by side effects. So it's like, okay, you're feeling nauseous, here are some recipes. You're feeling the taste of metal, here's, et cetera, right? So it's really tailored to that experience and has lots of recipes from around the world. It's great. And then in that moment, I was like, let me do a little design exercise. So let's say I was my mom, who's an older South Asian person who maybe won't eat all of these recipes. So I wonder if I took a picture of this recipe that's for this specific side effect, let's say to make the taste of metal feel better, whatever, she might not eat this recipe because it's just not from her cultural background. But what if I take a picture and told AI, like, hey, this recipe's purpose is this. Could you redo it, but with a South Asian flavor palette? So now it generated something, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. And then I started wondering, well, I'm not a nutritionist. I can't validate this. But what if the nutritionist at the cancer center was trained to do this exercise with the patient? And so then you could have like customized care without the nutritionist becoming an expert and having a master's in all culinary cuisine around the world. So these are like low-hanging, simple things that are like aided by AI, but like, you know, there's an expert in the room and there's the patient and it's customized. So I think this is where we need to think about things. So these are simple, low-hanging fruit that have such a huge impact on that relationship. That human relationship now has become stronger. That patient feels seen, that patient feels heard, you know. So I feel like that's where we should be thinking a little bit more about. So it's less about how do we make things efficient and faster. It's about how do we kind of slow it down, but the AI is helping us slow it down because it's doing the work, but we're validating it, you know? So,
yeah, I'll just add that question is very valid. I think it's the direction the conversation's gone because we have such an access problem in the United States and in Canada, and it's a fundamental break of the social contract, at least in Canada, which is I'm going to pay a lot of taxes, and in exchange, this entity called government is going to pool all that money and redistribute those resources for this very, very complicated public good called healthcare. We do the same with education. And that contract is broken. We have 6.5 million people without access to primary care, 12, 18-month waits for specialty care, et cetera, et cetera. So this is why the consumer doing it on their own, that the zero-sum game is happening because it's a fundamental access problem. Now, as Alvina said, when you're in, absolutely, and Payal will know a lot of examples, and I know Danina, you and the team, Ren, this is exactly what's happening. So at AMS, I think we've now funded 100 leaders who are, trying out use cases of this co-worker, in some form of AI, whether it's Gen AI, predictive, or agentic, co-worker with a clinician, co-work with a patient, and it's this new hybrid care team is exactly, I'll be honest, where most of the activity is happening around the world.
I think this really sets us up. We promised ourselves as we prepared for this panel that we're going to be tangible and we're going to get into sort of how do we help the system redesign. So maybe around the table, how do we help? Like Alvina brought in one of our conversations this great analogy saying, if when you want to learn how to drive, there's driver's ed. What's the driver's ed equivalent for patient use of AI and clinician sort of use of AI? So maybe from your perspectives, what are some of the things that the system needs to start thinking about, both from on the patient side and the system side? Maybe I'll start with Payal.
Sure, yeah. So, what comes to mind is some of the work, I think something that Ed sort of hinted on is AI scribes, right? So we know AI scribes are a tool that leverage AI to help clinicians document faster and kind of, to Ed's, he phrased it very lovely, lets us focus on our core job of taking care of patients. It came across very quickly. There was some organic growth in the market, and then the system, also recognizing some of the challenges with primary care, really wanted to understand how to enable it across the system. What did we do? I think for the first time ever, we got a whole bunch of regulatory bodies around the table and said, in 1 month, you're going to put a document that gives clinicians practical advice on how to do this. We got the body that represents patients, that represents privacy, that represents physicians, that all of those. And it's interesting, usually they put out their separate papers or conflicting, and the physicians kind of left to navigate it all themselves. But we got them in a room and they were able to give some very, very concrete guidance that really helped. We then went from, marginal AI scribe use to, I think it's over 30% in the province right now. So that would be like a very concrete thing, is like, let's just start getting the right players around the table and force them to make some very practical guidance very quickly, because the old ways that we sort of work through that aren't going to work here.
Ed, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with all that. And multimodal approach is what I think hospitals need to put out to their patients. Give them the traditional brick and mortar. Some people, that's all they want. They need it socially. There's a lot of reasons for it. Keep that. Virtual care, right? We got really good at virtual care during COVID, and then we shut it down. I'm not sure why. We went up to 70, 80%. Now it's maybe 5%. I'm not sure about Canada's statistics, but it went down in the United States quite dramatically. So why not still offer virtual care? And the third is AI. You should, I think healthcare organizations should be the ones that deliver this sort of safe AI capability interaction, these agents, so that I, as a patient, can save a lot of time, get accountable for my own healthcare, and save, again, the institution, the clinicians, a lot of time by making sure that they don't have to worry about sort of the things that are table stakes, right? So I now, as a patient, can just go to my app from my trusted organization, and I can do 85% potentially, whether it's through virtual care or an AI agent, saving everyone lots of time, lots of money, a lot of frustration, improves the experience for the clinician, for the patient, takes care of our physician shortages too that we're all dealing with. And so it's a beautiful thing. Then only when I need the clinician, because man, this is complicated. This is cancer. This is something that requires surgical intervention. Then yes, you want to take advantage of that situation, that high touch, that high expertise, and get taken care of. So that's what I think. Again, being practical is that every institution should come out, and maybe as a government should come out with this capability to empower the patient. And because if you don't, so one last thing, if you don't do this, the alternative is what's happening today. They're going to go to some startup, which is fine, could be fine, could not be fine. Why not have it coupled directly with your organization so that the patient, you have that stickiness, that loyalty, that great seamless experience?
Zaina, on the system side, from your perspective.
Yeah, these are all great points. I love, and reminder, Advantage for Canada, there are 8 consumer-facing health LLMs now? 8. And there were none as of last December. Okay. In 4 months, there's 8. None are available in Canada. So maybe this is an opportunity, our Ludditeness of Canada. I don't know that, I love Ed's idea of its sanction. It's almost like, I don't know if it was Mayo Clinic, Payal will know, and Ed might know, who had incredible kind of practice guidelines for patients that like all the Canadian institutions just took them because it's like, well, it's Mayo Clinic. It's kind of like what WebMD was as well. So I love that idea. Maybe I'll just add 2 more. And then Alvina, I think it's a great bridge to you. It's just AI literacy. So I love what the UK government has done, that the whole population will have unrestricted access to AI literacy. Again, let's not do what we didn't do with financial literacy and health literacy, where we're like, somebody will figure it out in the school system. And the biggest partner in the UK is the National Health Service. Why? Oh, they employ 2 million health workers and touch the entire population of 65 million people. So I think literacy for the population, there's many plays of that, including patients. And then literacy for the health workforce. And I'll just give an example. One of our fellows works for the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada. So that represents, Hayal, you'd know, 85,000 doctors. Is that the right number? Something like that. That
sounds about right, yeah.
Their BHAG is, I believe, within 3 years, that every single physician in Canada gets some form of AI training. I love that. So whether, again, Ed, it's your whole organization as the institution, but this kind of literacy, I think, will just raise everyone's boats, to Payal's point, because we're the super users, right, Alvina? You're an early adopter. We do not represent 99% of the population.
Exactly. Yeah.
Alvina, over to you, because like I said, you've mentioned that. I love that analogy of driver's ed and how we could potentially leverage some of the spaces where patients are in, like the waiting room. So interested in your perspective.
Yeah, so I mean, I always love going back to just looking at what have we done before that could become, just to give us mental models of things we've done in our past as human beings. We're amazing creatures. We've done so many things and revolutions, and so first I want to just clarify something. So like, the internet has existed for a while. The internet gave us access in a very loose term to information. Now, once I get to the information, do I understand it? Maybe, maybe not. And I think that's what Google did, or whatever search engine, so, but what AI is doing is, once you get to the information, you have a way of processing that information. So now it's not just access to information, it's access to some form of understanding, some form of interpretation. Now, is that understanding coming from like a interpretation that's correct? Is it right? Like, that's where all the nuance comes in, depending on if you know how to ask the questions, if you were trained on how to, prompt. So that's where like the literacy piece for me comes in, because it makes me think of, when cars became democratized. So, the Model T came out, and then now you're having crashes and there's no safety, there's no seat belts, there's the word Ed used early, accountability. So for me, accountability is a product of shared responsibility. Then we can all hold each other accountable, right? Because then we all know what part we need to do. So if in this room we have, everybody representing, let's say, a piece. So we have, let's say, Ed, you're going to be the manufacturer. So you're making a car, and I'm the driver, and Zaina, you're the government body that's making sure that Ed makes sure that there's seat belts and that the brakes work and whatever, so it's like this shared responsibility model. And then you have the mechanic that knows how to repair the cars. Maybe that's the health system. So it's like this model of shared responsibility, where we have taught each other together of what we each need to do this safely, and then we can hold each other accountable. Because then, once I've been trained how to drive my car and have a license, and I don't wear my seatbelt, and you can find me, you can give me a ticket, or you know what I mean. So this is kind of where my head goes to, looking at what have we done before that we can kind of be inspired by and leverage. Like, how did we get to a structured thing from chaos? So, but can we do it faster? Because we shouldn't wait 50 years. Because in 50 years, the amount of car crashes we're going to have with AI are going to be way more devastating than the car crashes that we did experience, because it's moving so fast.
And I'd add, and we're now backtracking because we didn't do that when social media came.
Exactly.
And now Like,
I don't want my
anyway.
8-year-old to drive an AI vehicle
Mm,
because he
mhm,
cannot discern that this is not a real person. He does not
mhm.
have the cognitive capacity, just like I don't want him to drive my car as an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old, right? So that's where the whole piece of could the low-hanging fruit again be AI literacy. So if you know, coming back to the waiting room idea, if you know that your patients are on their phones talking to ChatGPT or whatever other model, why not have a one pager on saying, hey, listen, here's where we are. We're not going to fight this. Let's just accept this, right? Like the
Mhm,
prohibition doesn't work. Like we've done it with alcohol. It
mhm,
didn't work. So
mhm.
so this concept of saying, why don't we provide information so that we can do it safely and just openly have that dialogue of, look, I'm not trying to stop you. I'm trying to help you do this safely. So, kind
Ayal,
of.
I'm interested. What do you see as physicians' role in this? Do they have a role in this?
So, I mean, look, I think there's, as Zaina pointed out, there's all, patients, people have all kinds of, ability towards technology, towards AI, trust, right?
Mm,
And I think the role of the physician varies based on the patient, right? For some patients, they're incredibly knowledgeable, they're incredibly powerful, like they understand this, they're going to go use AI, they're going to use it safely, they're going to use it well, it's going to empower their health. Amazing. There's others who might need some help,
mhm,
to really leverage the benefits of AI. So the way I see it, like, look, right now I'm taught if I want you to be healthier and, exercise better and eat better, I'm going to spend 10 minutes trying to teach you what a good exercise or work with you to develop a good exercise regime looks like. Maybe I spend 10 minutes teaching you how to safely use, a provincially approved AI tool that's going to keep your data safe. And then you can go figure out, your ideal exercise routine and, kind of as Alvina
mm,
said, your ideal nutritional regime. So, I think, not just physicians, but all clinicians in the health system can have a role to play in supporting patients when they need that support and adopting these tools well. But kind of back to Zaina's point of access, we don't have time to properly counsel everybody the way we should around, a healthy lifestyle. We just don't. We never will. So this is where I think it's such an exciting opportunity. I can spend 10 minutes and then empower
mhm.
you to sort of enable it for yourself and keep changing and adapting. So I think that's, kind of where we need to get to as a system. And I think most clinicians would really welcome that. I mean, we ultimately want to empower our patients, and I think that would be like very welcome by physicians as long as they're sort of supported in the change.
You hinted at something that I have learned about Zaina. One of Zaina's hats is Chief Program Officer at AMS. And we just participated, most of us around this call, actually, in a wonderful conference. And there was a keynote speaker who has looked into the sort of the archetypes of patients and their use of AI. And so she identified 3 archetypes that really resonated with me. One being an informed collaborator. So that's, to Payal's point, a patient who uses AI to enhance understanding and participate more actively in their care. They come with structured questions, not just
Like Alvina.
information. Yes,
Alvina.
exactly. They use AI to clarify, to translate. They're open to correction. They tend to improve the quality of interaction. Then the second type she identified is the minimizers. So patients who use AI to self-manage, downplay, and delay care. So they rely on AI to reassure themselves and avoid escalations. And the risk there is that they may not present until later. And then finally, what she called cyberchondriacs. So patients who use AI in a way that amplifies concern, anxiety, certainty. They overinterpret outputs and escalate worst case scenarios. And they may arrive with extensive information, long printouts. And it seems to me, Payal, that from my physician sort of collaborators around me, I hear a lot about these, right? When I hear complaints, they're like, oh, they come with these lists and, I have to spend even more time with them. And so can you speak to sort of what defines each of these in practice and kind of what behaviors distinguish them other than what I've just said? Payal. maybe start with you.
Yeah, I can start. Like, I think I think it's a really great categorization, and I think it speaks to this is not like a one size fits all, right? We've got to be able to think through the spectrum of where our population is at and how we can support. I think I'll speak now really as a primary care doctor, and maybe other clinicians who have a strong relationship with their patients. I think that's where that's so important, because then I can counsel you. If I know kind of where you might fit and what your pitfalls might be with AI, then we can work together. I can say AI is great, but I know you tend to really look for like the problem and always focus. So maybe you prompt it in this way or ask these types of questions to limit it. So, we're not there yet. Most clinicians would not have the ability to kind of work through that with a patient, but I think that's where we need to get to. Is I'm a human. I know who you are as a human, and then together we're going to work through how you use this tool, to best meet your needs. So, yeah, I think that's so much of what is on the table, and we've got to work through fast. As we said, we can't take 50 years to figure this out. We've got to start working through this quickly.
Alvina, what keeps someone in a collaborator mode, as we've identified you as the quintessential example of a AI collaborator?
I think it's an exercise in self-awareness. So it's like understanding that this is a machine, it has its limits. I'm this and this, and these are my limits in terms of my training, my capacity, my knowledge of whatever subject. And my physician is a person with their limits too. So for example, there might be an expert in, what they're a professional in, but the limits that they have is the understanding of my daily life. So there's so it's when you recognize that, then you can ask questions that remain open, right? So you're not the goal is not to make AI kind of convince you of something. It's to explore. So, I didn't ask a question like, "Oh my gosh, is this cancer?" It was more like, "Hey, here are some things I'm feeling. Like I'm wondering, what would you do with this information if you were I don't know, a med student and someone walked in with these symptoms? What questions would you ask them? Then what would you do?" And then so that was like just staying in that kind of exploration mode, and rather than pointing it to something and saying, "Oh, I think this is happening," right? So. So I think it's being in that space of exploration rather than like having already kind of a target and you're trying to run after that target, because you will go towards that, right? Like we what's that word? A confirmation bias, right? Like if I tell you you're going to see a red car today, you're going to start noticing all the red cars on the highway today, right? So there's something that requires that kind of like that self-awareness of, okay, I'm playing this role. And I am bringing information my doctor doesn't know, because I'm bringing my everyday life experience. The doctor doesn't know when I have my stomach ache, so I'm bringing that information, right? So, yeah, I think it's a bridge to getting that care. And earlier, just one small thing I wanted to say was I was thinking about access and equity and things like that, and I was wondering, like, again, I like coming back to transportation as a system as an example. It's not perfect, but it's just an idea of, if we had cars does not mean that we stopped having the bus, as in not everybody maybe will be able to drive the car. There could be many reasons, or doesn't want to, whatever the reason may be. We didn't just make it this black and white thing, or okay, no cars or yes cars. It's like, okay, we have this system and we allow for other modes. It's multimodal. And you can still take the bus, you can still walk, you can take your bike. So it's this kind of idea of how do we make this multimodal so that the line at the bus stop is not miles and miles long. That's how I see it, because the bus stop to me represents, well, in Canada, the public system. So I want that line to be shorter so that those who are most vulnerable can have the most time they need face to face with the clinician who needs to do more digging than perhaps with me, So that's how I'm trying to think about it.
Taking cue from our poll earlier, it's interestingly divided. We have almost half of people using AI occasionally, 33% frequently, 10% rarely, and 13% not yet, but expecting it. So it seems to be almost evenly divided. Ed, which group are we designing for? Which archetype do you feel like our health systems are being designed for today? Anyone in particular?
Probably the larger category that you mentioned. Definitely not for entry level, but people who are already familiar with it. I just would say that no one got trained on the iPhone. No one got trained on Netflix.
That's true. Yeah.
This is moving way too fast, and I mean, for me, in a good way. I like the speed, and so I don't know that you could suddenly start trying to train your entire country or your province or what have you. I think that we should offer some training on our apps, for our patients, put out some short videos, things like that. I think the best thing to do is when you have a consult with Dr. Agarwal, she is talking you through and at the same time using AI, and you're seeing it and you're experiencing it and you start getting it. If you don't already get it, you start getting it. I think that's what's going to enable safe change and transformation, is when we all start using it, encouraging our patients to use it, and clinicians, we adopt it and use it. That's going to be the big thing, and it'll be designed for, I want to make sure I answered your question, for that large group, the people that are using it, not so much brand new people. It's just something that, again, with the Netflix, you just kind of pick up.
Yeah. And I still have uncles who have a flip phone who never got an iPhone. Right? There's just always giving.
Yeah.
I know we're at the end. Ed, you so glossed over a very bold statement. I think you said that you predict in your book that 85% of all kind of care interactions we have will be with AI. It's a pretty big mic drop.
Yeah.
Just tell us a little more, and how much are you getting rocks and tomatoes thrown at you for daring to say such a thing?
Oh yeah. There was tremendous pushback, but even in the last couple months, the tide is definitely turning. There's more acceptance now. Again, it's just like typical change management processes. There's the detractors, there's the people saying no, cross their arms, but then the evidence, you can't hold it back. So you have to embrace it. And I think the more of us that embrace it and run with it in a safe way, we can be that safety net by embracing it and then sharing how we do it in a safe way. But yeah, I think 65% of our patients will receive 85% of their care virtually. So with agents, taking away the chore from our clinicians so they can practice top of license, I think everyone's going to be happier at the end of the day, and healthcare will control the costs a little bit more.
We have 1 minute left. Before I conclude, maybe quickly around the table, one thing from your perspective we should start doing immediately. So, Alvina, start with you.
Oh my gosh. One thing you should start doing immediately. I think what we're doing right now. So we have different people, different perspectives around the table, and there's mutual respect, and we're listening to each other, and we're not diminishing these ideas. We're saying, oh, I didn't think of it this way, and having this open conversation and just build forward together, like co-create.
Thank you. Ed?
Download a new AI app and jump in, whether it's for your next vacation or whatever. Don't do healthcare, do something different. It'll change how you think about things, and you'll see more.
Thank you. Payal?
I think primary care in Canada is such a front line to that connection with patients. I'd love to see very quickly, let's get primary care docs, sort of given that education to allow them to have that conversation with their patients. I think that'd make a huge difference in empowering our patients.
Love that.
I'll blend Payal and Ed's. I'd say the fact that primary care in Canada is one of the fastest adopters, like Payal just said, 30%, you guys, is gobsmacking. I don't know any country in the world where 30% of our primary clinicians are using two AI tools, both the Scribe and, Doximity and open evidence. I think that's going to open up the crack, Ed, just like if you used it to plan a trip, you've used it. So I think that's going to have a game-changing ripple effect. So my advice for all of us, all of you on this thing, is role model. So all of us, if we're not sick and a patient, I think a caregiver to somebody, a kid, a spouse, a mom. I think because I have the word doctor in my title, my entire Lebanese family believes I'm a medical doctor. So I try to practice a bit myself as I'm trying to help people I care for as a care partner. And the Microsoft data just came out. 1 in 7 of the 600,000 care exchanges with their AI agent were family caregivers. Right. So I think just try it out and see what it's like. And then you'll figure out which of the 3 buckets, the archetypes you fall in.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. This brings us to the end of this really exciting collective, which I hope our audience has appreciated. This is exactly the type of conversation that CareNext Collective is designed to hold, bringing different perspectives together, working through complexity and translating into action. Thank you to our panelists for a thoughtful discussion, and thank you to all of you for being part of this community. We will be continuing our AI series and look forward to the May Collective, where we will get into one of the very important notions mentioned today, which is how do we support our clinicians in reducing the administrative burden through the use of AI. So thank you once again, and looking forward to seeing you all in May. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.